Hello, Daniel Blanco here. Today I'm going to be demoing how to create an EKS cluster using Terraform, and more importantly, accessing that cluster using IAM roles, right? So first, you might want to go to the official documentation for EKS, and in there, they have some boilerplate code that you can use to help you get started. So this is that repository that contains the boilerplate code. And in this demo here, I've taken that code and modified it a little bit. Not too much. Mainly what I've done is added these IAM roles that will be able to access the cluster, and created a couple users that are associated to that role to access the cluster. So this is the creation of the user and the roles. Um, and more importantly, there are EKS access entries. So these access entries are what associate your IAM roles to your EKS cluster. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the pipeline we're going to use to run the Terraform code. It's right here. And in this code, you can see that we run Terraform based on a dispatch, right? So you have to manually run it, and you give it either the apply, destroy, or plan option. So by default, it's just going to plan it, and you can configure it to assume a role. And then it has a backend configured, right? So a backend is where it's going to save the backup of your Terraform files. And not only that, it'll use a DynamoDB table to lock operations so that only one pipeline can be running at a time. Everything else is pretty simple, right? It's just going to go through and run the basic Terraform commands. Okay. If we go back to the README, you'll see that there are 4 required variables, right? Your AWS access key, secret key, your Terraform S3 bucket backend name, and your EKS cluster name. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. You just have to click on Actions. Now, I do have a role configured, so you don't need a role, that's okay. But if you have one configured, when you run the workflow, you can use it right here. You just have to give it the name of the role. And for the directory, that is going to be the directory that contains the module, the code, which in my case, Terraform, EKS. Now, if I hit run workflow, it's going to CD to that directory and run the plan operations. So let's go ahead and run that. When the pipeline's done, you can see that it created the S3 bucket and DynamoDB table if it needed to, or it just uses the same one. And then you can expand the Terraform plan area, and you can see all of the changes that it plans to make. This is really nice because if you're running this after making a small change, it'll just show you like those small changes that it plans to add or whatever. So you can scroll through this and you can see all of the things that it's going to create. It's quite a lot. In fact, if you go to the bottom, it'll give you a summary. Right there. So it's going to add 82 resources to create this cluster, right? So that's going to be, VPC, EC2 instances for your nodes, your node groups, your IAM roles, your access entries. So you can kind of scroll through this output and look at all the stuff it's going to be creating. Since the plan succeeded, we can now run with the apply option. And this time that will apply the changes to our AWS account. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. That should take a while, probably around 15 minutes to run. When the Terraform pipeline is done running, to go ahead and test it, first, let's make sure that the cluster was created. You can see here that we do have a cluster created. And then we can also see that we have an EKS admin user and a viewer, right? So first thing to do is to create your access keys for the admin user. I've already done that. And then to log into Cloud Shell, run AWS configure. So I'll run AWS. Oh, looks like it needs to be restarted here. That's okay. So now I can run AWS configure. And then when you run that command, it'll prompt you for your credentials. The next step is to assume the role that was created. So this is going to be the name of the role, your cluster name, minus EKS admin role. And as a little shortcut, I created a script here to help you assume and unset a role. In this script, you just have to give it the role name, and then it'll set the proper environment variables for you just by doing that. So you can copy this script here. You can go back to Cloud Shell, and you can paste it in there. And you have to source it so that the environment variables persist. And the name of the role is just going to be your cluster name. And then this value here. So after you run that, you should get a confirmation that you've assumed the role. Once you've assumed the role, then you can generate a config, right? So you can copy this command here. You can run that, update it to your cluster name, and run that command. Now you should have access to the kubectl CLI. You'll be able to run commands to create pods or deployments or anything that an admin would be able to do. Okay, and to verify that you're an admin, you could use the commands from this documentation here. So if you go into here, it gives you the documentation on how to pull up the different EKS policies that are available, access association policies, and then access entries and access entries associations, right? So any policy that is associated to an access entry can run whatever those commands are allowed to run, whatever those access entries. So if I run this one, for example, then it's going to list all of the different access policies that you can be part of, associated to. The one that this account is associated to is the admin policy, right? And you could verify that by running this command right here, which I will not run because it'll expose my account ID, but overall, that's pretty much it. So let's take a look here on what we did. We created a EKS cluster. We set some environment variables to do that first, and we were able to access it using IAM roles. This repository is set to private. You should be able to follow along just from the video if you want to create something on your own. Remember, the boilerplate code was taken from this public repo that is in the Terraform documentation. Really, all that we had to add to it if you look, is these IAM roles and policies for the different users that we wanted to have access the cluster, and more importantly, these access entries, right? These access entry associations are what associated a role to an access policy. Okay, so that's how you're able to get access to the kubectl command. But yeah, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, then you can leave a comment, and I appreciate it. Thank you.